welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. All right, we are recording for Contrarians Corner for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
America's most bizarre and brutal crimes.
I don't know, maybe back in the 70s.
Who will survive and what will be left of them? These were all questions and statements posed on the original poster.
I mean, that could be out of a Saw poster.
It's true. Hello, my name is Alex. And that sultry Peruvian voice you are hearing on the other side of the table is my co-host Julio. We are the Contrarians, and welcome back to where we're right and you're wrong. As we continue on the autumn of the remake, or autumn of remakes.
Autumn of remakes, and as we begin year 6.
That's right. This is fresh into year 6. Coming off the heels of our, this will be released sequentially after the
Embreeze?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, if this is your first time listening to the Contrarians, welcome. If you're a long-time listener, welcome to year 6. What we like to do here on the Contrarians is rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine, as we like to say. Pick a movie that's fresh, make a case for why it could be rotten, find a nasty green splotch, and make a case for why it should be a shiny red tomato. Basically, just to prove that you can be snarky or over the moon about any damn thing that you choose to be. And we are in the middle, coming on the tail end, I should say, not the middle. We're coming around on the autumn of remakes as we begin part 1 of our 2-part journey into one of the most famed horror franchises of all time.
Do you consider yourself a Texan, Alex?
I do, absolutely.
I don't think I do, but I've lived here in Texas for over 10 years now, so I think I have at least a little bit of say as far as what is Texan, what isn't Texan, how this movie depicts Texas.
Well, it's even more than that because they shot this in Travis County. So this is home for us.
This is home.
This is exactly what Austin was in 1974.
This is a fresh movie, so we're about to just take it down a peg. But if you want to know how we really feel, just stick around for the second half of the show, Real Talk, where we tell you how we really feel. If you've listened to the show for a while, you probably know how Alex feels, at least.
Yes.
But you never know.
Since day one. This is at 88%, so this is kind of right at the cutoff. We typically try to do high 80s up to 100s, and then for Rotten, we usually stick to, what do we say? We usually go about 30 and below.
Yeah. Every now and then, we'll do something that's high 30s.
Yeah, for our last 2 episodes for The Untouchables and for
The Upside.
The Upside, we had to kind of deviate from our usual course. But yeah, going back in time quite a bit, we usually have a pretty good wheelhouse of between 1980 up until present, as those are the most easily accessible movies, both for viewing purposes and also for literature purposes and reviews and whatnot. But we are dipping our toe into the 70s pool here, going back to the times of Saturday Night Fever. And, I mean...
Taxi Driver.
Very similar movies overall. With the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by famed horror director Tobe Hooper, released on October 1st of the year 1974. It is 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means that I'm not so sure about at the time it was released, but certainly its legacy is a fresh one.
There were no Rotten Tomatoes back in the 70s. I guess I'm sure that as soon as Rotten Tomatoes opened for business, a whole bunch of critics that had been just saving their wisdom about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they just flooded the website. I got 3 fresh quotes. We can start with Sean Axemaker from SeanAxe.com. He says, Along with Night of the Living Dead and The Last House on the Left, it ushered in the modern age of horror in the 1970s. It is one of the great transgressive American horrors and is still the film upon which Hooper's reputation is built. So you shake your head a little bit.
We've just started Contrarians Corner. Let's not get too deep into it here.
Matt Brunson from Creative Loafing says, a genuine classic of the genre, a punishing, unrelenting nightmare that never allows viewers even a moment of sanity or security.
Moment of sanity, that's for sure.
Finally, Noel Murray from The Dissolve. He says, as disgusting, harrowing, and ugly as the 1974 horror classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, the film has moments of eerie beauty.
Okay.
Okay, Noel.
Yeah.
A little concerned about that, buddy.
Know what you're into, my friend. I was trying to find any type of actual review from the time it was released. Ebert's review is still up.
From back in the day?
From 74, yep. When he gave it 2 stars. And he went on a 4-star system, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like right down the middle. He said half a Rotten Tomato for him.
I know it was met in many circles with agog and resentment, and not resentment, but resistance and kind of shock and awe. And it was the standard bearer for quite a while in terms of the horror genre and name dropping something. I know it was always the popular one amongst like politicians and senators and shit when they called for revitalization or revamping of the rating system. It was always movies like that Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Before they could blame video games.
That's right.
They could blame the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, they tried to, because there was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Atari video game, which was blamed for being, influential and horrendously violent. Whereas if you play it today, even back then, I have no idea what you're looking at.
It's rated B for blocky graphics.
Exactly. Leatherface is like a black stick figure with the Leatherface mask, but it's on sideways. It's no go. That being said, if you have a copy of it you don't want, please mail it to me because I need it for my collection. So let's get into the, for lack of a better term, meat and potatoes of this movie here. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre begins with narration from well-known actor. His name already escaped me.
John LaRoquette.
Okay,
He of Night Court.
He of Night Court. John LaRoquette of Night Court Manor.
That's who you think of when you think creepy narration to open a disturbing horror movie. Let's get John LaRoquette on the phone.
Yeah, for real. Not really an imposing voice. Doesn't sound like he wants to be there. Does not set the proper tone.
Those episodes where you open with the Wikipedia summation? Mm-hmm. You do a better job doing that than what John LaRoquette does with this opening.
Without the... we open in a backwoods Texas town. It's never really name dropped, is it?
I mean, I don't think that they could go that far. They could probably...
They didn't want to pin it on any city in Texas. Yeah. Texas was enough.
Liability. You don't want to piss them off that much.
We open up on a horrifying decomposing skeleton as we hear the local radio station, the report a series of grave robbings in this town. It happened out in Bastrop. It wasn't Travis County, excuse me. It was Bastrop County. I think it was both. They did some in Bastrop and Travis County.
Maybe back in the day, Travis County...
It was just Pangea.
Everything. Yeah, exactly. Before the earth split asunder.
It's a group of kids we're dealing with here. A group of 5 white kids.
Not about kids, man.
Well, I think they're
young
adults. To be. We got the Grease syndrome going on here. I'm trying to think if I can... All their names off the top of my head. Sally, Paul, Franklin, Jerry, and Pam?
Yes, except, is it Paul? I thought it was Kirk.
It is Kirk.
God, how did I get that?
I don't know where I got Paul from.
Because you were listening to the Beatles.
Okay. Regardless.
Paul, Ringo, George.
Our 2 main characters, our protagonist is obviously Sally, played by Marilyn Burns.
Okay, you know that, and I know that, because we watched the movie all the way to the end. When you're watching the movie, I mean, these are 5 interchangeable white young adults. The only one that's kind of distinctive is the one that's in a wheelchair.
Franklin.
Yeah.
Introduced to us as the invalid brother, Franklin.
Yeah.
played by Paul Partain. That's why. I thought Paul.
That's why you got real. I'm surprised you didn't call her Marilyn.
My longtime close personal friend, Marilyn Burns.
But yeah, I mean, when you watch the movie, up until the point where there's only one of these young adults surviving, it could be anyone's. There's really no real moment. I mean, if anything, I would say Franklin is the protagonist at first when I was watching it for the first time ever.
He's definitely the most vocal.
Right. He gets the most to say. He gets the most screen time.
He's
Nothing
supposed to be sympathetic, I guess.
Right. He has something going on, right? He's the guy that feels left out because, of course, nobody wants to push him around. Everybody is constantly leaving to go have fun, and they forget that he can't just really get by on his own, at least not easily. But even then, I mean, to me, you've seen this movie like 400 times, and
Correct.
you were still having trouble remembering the names. So that says something about the characters and the characterization.
The depth of characters here. Speaking of depth of character, one of our leads in the movie, who's doesn't even have a fucking name, it's just Hitchhiker. Edwin Neal's introduced to us as crazy on the side of the road hitchhiker that up until like the 5th or 6th time I saw this, I never really caught on to that birthmark on the side of his face.
Do you think it was just blood?
I just thought it was like dirt or some shit. I didn't realize that was like a marking of his, but it stays, consistent throughout the duration of the film.
He looks like James Franco.
I've been told hitchhiking was way more viable and acceptable back in the day. It still just makes no sense to me here.
I mean, I can buy that maybe back in the 70s, you would make the mistake of picking up someone who looked like an okay person. I cannot imagine anyone ever picking up this dude.
You would pick up Robin Wright to take her to San Francisco.
Exactly. I was trying to be less direct about it. This guy's not Robin Wright.
Well, I mean...
he's not even James Franco. He kind of looks like James Franco, but James Franco, if he was just
you still wouldn't
madman.
pick Robin Wright up if she was all unkempt and had, a satchel full of God knows what and a blade hanging out of her sock.
Robin Wright from The Pledge, where she's like missing a tooth.
Yes.
And yeah, I was still, because, first I would be like, hey, it's Robin Wright. I'll pick her up. But this guy's no one.
Edwin Neal. Not even Ed O'Neill, just Edwin Neal.
Is he Ed O'Neill's great grandfather? It's the 1870s.
His half brother. Kim Hinkle and Toby Hooper wrote this movie, and this scene is clear they just wanted to flex their slaughterhouse knowledge muscle in that it's just dialogue between Edwin Neal and Franklin about how livestock is slaughtered in a slaughterhouse nowadays. No one else is in on this conversation, nor are they enjoying it.
That includes the audience. It's just padding. This movie, the first half of the movie is just padding until they get to the dude with the chainsaw. It's just, what are we doing here? I don't even know what the purpose of this trip is. They're kind of sightseeing, but there's no... Here's the thing. I don't have a concrete idea of when the movie's going to end. What is the achievable goal? It's just these guys driving and picking up a really weird guy and then sightseeing some more, and then they start getting killed.
They move on pretty quickly from the hitchhiker. I keep wanting to say he has a name, but I know he doesn't, because I'm so used to just calling him the crazy brother, who 3 generations later would be played by Matthew McConaughey. So, full circle.
Sort of. I mean, Matthew McConaughey's career, you could say it
in
went a little better than
in a certain
Mr.
sense,
O'Neill's.
It went past Edwin Neal's. In another sense, it eclipsed him 4 times over. Yeah, Edwin Neal's just going on about God knows what, takes a picture of Franklin, puts it in a foil pouch with what appears to be gunpowder, lights it ablaze, takes his blade out, cuts Franklin, cuts his own hand, gets kicked out of the van, marks the side of it with his own blood.
It took that much for them to kick him out of the van.
Yeah.
He was being a
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. He cut himself and they were just like still cool with it. It wasn't until he cut Franklin and potentially started a fire. It was the fire in the van that did it. No one cares about Franklin. Kicks him out of the van. Franklin screaming.
There's a lot of, Josh Gad would play Franklin.
Oh, absolutely.
If you made that movie today. Actually, they made it in 2003, but I think that just missed the cutoff for Gad.
If we had like
name.
2007 level of Jonah Hill fat, I think like Jonah Hill could play it. But God
much.
bless him. As a fellow fat man, I applaud him for getting in shape. Now he would play the hitchhiker.
Franklin, speaking of Franklin, because really he's, I guess, the one character. There's like a mean streak to this movie that, of course, becomes more obvious and more direct as it goes on. But even from the beginning, because I just now remember that the way the movie opens is Franklin, the dude in the that's in a wheelchair, peeing in a can,
In a coffee can.
and then something happens, but he just tumbles out of the
A
wheelchair.
truck comes by and
Oh, yeah.
causes a big gust of wind.
Right, and then he just falls down. It's just, we're opening with a pratfall where the fat guy in the wheelchair falls off the wheelchair, rolls down the hill, screams. So we just came out of watching a movie, 2 movies really, back to back, about a guy in a wheelchair and his caretaker and how that changes their lives and joy and crowd pleasing. And now it was a little bit of a shock to the system to open this movie with a guy in a wheelchair just not only being kind of embarrassed, emasculated, but also just in such a mean way. And I wasn't sure if that was the intent of the movie. But then as it keeps going and they just keep piling on disgrace after disgrace on Franklin.
I mean, the working title of this movie was Franklin and the No Good, Awful, Terrible Day.
But then they realized that the movie doesn't end when Franklin dies, so they had to change the name to something else.
Yeah, I can't imagine there were too many worse days in Franklin's life. They stop at a gas station that also sells barbecue, and it's just established we're just in this crazy-ass backwoods town, and these kids are just acting like not a care in the world, that they're going to be just all right, and, you know, there's nothing to be alarmed with.
So are they, because I couldn't tell from their accents.
Despite the fact that they're running out of gasoline and there's not another gas station in sight.
Are they from Texas, and they're just going into deep Texas, or are they from somewhere else?
I couldn't tell. I know they weren't from around them parts, because the whole reason they were going there was to visit Sally and Franklin's grandpa's old place.
Right.
That they remembered from their childhood. But their haircuts, they looked more New York. They didn't look too Texas.
Yeah. And that would explain why they make bad choice after bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an
It
attempt
also
at
explains why they don't
explaining
have any guns. They're not from Texas.
Yes, exactly. They're complaining about the heat.
That's right. Yeah, and that van just looked like a miserable thing to travel in.
So this is, if you're not from Texas, in the 70s, I imagine, right? Before the internet, before you could just Google Texas and see.
After Woodstock 1, but before Woodstock 94.
Yes. I watched this movie.
It's Woodstock. I don't know why I called it Woodstock 1.
It's a new hope. You watch this movie and you're like, why would anyone ever go to Texas?
Must be some good barbecue.
Well, they kind of undersell the barbecue thing because Franklin eats some. And I mean, it's an underreaction, if nothing else.
But he does react to it, because it turns out in the end the barbecue's people. The first bite he takes of the sausage, he looks at it like, "What the fuck is this?" And then he just goes back to eating it.
Right, but it's like, I mean, it's not. They're not selling me barbecue
Texas.
as the reason to come to Texas. Come to Texas if you want to see just some hardcore weird rednecks and just be creeped out. Really, there's more to Texas than I have to believe that there was more to Texas than that, even in the 70s.
Well, the prequel is when they visit the Alamo. And Franklin's wheelchair hits a rock and he rolls into the Riverwalk. That's why he's so bitter by the time they get to the home.
I can just imagine the 5 of them just standing in front of the Alamo and just like in the guilt trip. Like, so how long are we supposed to stay here?
They arrive at the Hardesty's grandfather's former estate. They're all looking around, having a joyous time. Franklin, of course, miserable downstairs, having a hard time wheeling himself around, as there's no handicap entrance. There's no, not even gravel. It's just a dirt path. He's having a hard time navigating through. Our first casualties, Pam and Kirk, wander off the property, which doesn't look like they go too far, but they hear a generator ringing, and they see the property that's neighboring it. They walk up, and it's at this point they're looking for gasoline. Because they hear the generator.
Right, I guess that's what they were doing.
Yeah, because the first gas station they went to, the only gas station in Bastrop County at this point, the only game in town was out of gasoline, so They're there to have fun, but also on a quest. I don't know what the backup plan was if they didn't find gasoline.
Right, because, see, what got me confused is they tell Franklin they're going to go swim.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, I'm not going to go swim because I have my wheelchair. So then they go, and I completely missed the fact that they were looking for gas.
Yeah, they go
They're
to the
so
swimming
stupid
hole, but
that I just assumed they were just wandering off into
they would just
strangers.
wander into a stranger's home. What's
Yeah.
going on over here? I mean, they are dumbass white people, so they're
Right.
just like, oh, well, my goodness. Yeah, but they go to the swimming hole. It's abandoned. They hear the generator. They go up. Pam, first of all, Kirk finds a human tooth on the patio there.
And he thinks it's
And
hilarious.
instead of a warning sign, he throws it on her as though it were, so much dead frog and just, messing with your girlfriend when you're 14 years old. She gets grossed out, goes and sits on the swinging bench outside the house. Beautiful home. Beautiful. Kirk hears someone inside, hears a pig, and he thinks there's trouble afoot. So he wanders in, just breaking and entering. Wanders into this other home, trips going into the doorway, and we get our first emergence of Leatherface in this movie.
Out of nowhere, no build up. We are
No musical crescendo.
Nope. It's been so long. I mean, we're 30 minutes into the movie at least, and there's been nothing other than questionable barbecue and bad teeth. We haven't really seen anything that would even indicate that this is going to be a brutal. Okay, well, there's the opening. I just remembered the opening. Not La Roquette's voice, but the picture of the.
But still, there's nothing that's going to indicate that we're going to see a huge man wearing another person's face and then hammering this dude in the head.
Like I said, it's been so long that I already forgot anyway that there was that opening with the corpses or whatever. So he comes out and it's just maybe like a 5-second shot where he hammers him, right?
Mm-hmm.
It like
hits him in the head with a mallet.
Yeah. And then that's it.
Kurt starts convulsing a bit. Leatherface pulls him in and slams the door shut. Then we cut to Pam outside. Kirk, where are you, Kirk? And then, of course, like a dumbass, she wanders in there herself. Difference being she goes left where he went straight, trips over into a room that's just full of dead animals, human bones, feathers.
Cut to, I don't know, 5 minutes of just shots of the bones there. I think Toby Hooper finds bones a lot creepier than I do. He overestimated the impact of those bones because maybe 1 or 2 shots, that's enough to sell you the idea.
And basically, Toby Hooper got a gong and figured out how to work sound distortion because he's just over and over again. Yes, and this does go on for like legitimately, I think, about 2.5 minutes. And then she finally, after looking around for 2.5 minutes, thinks I probably should get the fuck out of here. So gets up and goes to run out. Leatherface reemerges, grabs her by the waist, carries her to the kitchen, which is a makeshift butcher shop, and then hangs her out to dry on a meat hook.
This is where the movie turns. This is where I stopped having a relatively good time. And I was just disgusted and appalled.
This is definitely where it stops fucking around.
Right, because even when, what's his name gets killed? Derek?
Whitey. Kirk.
That guy, Kirk. Even when he gets, that's kind of funny because he just comes out of nowhere. And yeah, the way he convulses is just kind of comedic. And we've been laughing at Franklin for so long that just you can't blame me for just being happy that misery happened to someone else. But then this is just uncalled for. Just you grab this girl whose biggest crime was probably hanging out with these douchebags and impales her on a hook. And the movie doesn't even have the good sense of cutting away. He just lets her sink into the hook in the background while Leatherface just goes about his day. He fires up his chainsaw.
She's there alive on the hook, in indescribable pain. And then he takes out the chainsaw and he's chopping up her boyfriend in front of her.
Right. Yeah. So just, I don't know. I think that this is where Toby Hooper and I disconnected as far as what makes for a pleasant, interesting movie experience. Because I feel like he crossed the line. If you're going to be this much of an asshole to a character, you need to get me on your side. I need to think, okay, well, she had it coming, or she
had done nothing wrong up until this point.
Right, that's the thing. It just feels, and you can't undo it. That's the thing. Like once he puts her in that hook, we know that it's over. but and the shot lingers there. Yeah, it was just.
We make sure to linger, and then we get the up and down shot where we see her feet up off the ground. There's a big
in case you missed the point that she's just hanging on the hook.
A drip tray under her, a big trough to make sure that
that barbecue
Leatherface,
sauce
he doesn't want blood on his floor. Jerry is with Sally and Franklin. He thinks they're out goofing around. They're probably out screwing somewhere, as they are teens, amorous teens. He's in their mid to late 30s. He sets out in search of his friends. He obviously, the only game in town is this house next to them. He walks over there, hears some commotion, thinks they're playing a trick on him, wanders in, and he suffers a similar fate. He finds Pam in a freezer, a meat freezer, and
she's still alive.
She's not alive. What I've read was this is like the gas escaping her body, and so it causes her to convulse.
Okay, the movie did not do a good job explaining that, because she...
Or like, if you put like a dead body on ice, it'll cause it to like freak out. It's like those...
let's get Mythbusters on the phone.
It's like those bowls you can get in Japan with the calamari when you pour the ink on them and they start like flipping out in their bowl. Yeah.
Well, this movie's taking place in Texas,
sauce,
not in Japan.
The Japanese katana massacre. This is not. Yeah, Jerry gets killed, letting out a very soprano like scream right before he gets bludgeoned over the head with a hammer. And Leatherface, at this point, we get like this ridiculous sympathetic shot of him like sitting out while the sun sets, and this woe's me, what a day.
It's like they keep coming.
I just want to be left alone.
I couldn't. I mean, we jest, but really, I couldn't read what was going on with that shot. I mean, I could tell he was distressed, but because he has a mask that covers, he's like the Green Goblin in the first Spider-Man movie, but Sam Raimi. You can't tell his facial expressions. His facial expressions are hidden by this.
Just Willem Dafoe under there.
Could be.
Totally relaxed.
He sits down, he puts his head on his hands, the universal body language for distress. But I couldn't tell if he was just upset that things had kind of gotten out of hand. Like he didn't plan to kill anyone today, and now he has three bodies under his belt. Or was he upset that there's more? He can tell, like, man, every time, like, you see like a roach, you kill the roach, and then you find another roach like 5 minutes later, and you're like, fuck, is there a nest somewhere? So I couldn't tell, and really the movie never gives you an answer. This is the one moment that they come close to maybe giving you a glimpse into Leatherface, legendary horror icon Leatherface. I could maybe try to get into his head, but no, nothing else. There's no follow-up.
Yeah, it's like he feels some remorse, but then he just kind of looks up and says, good. I'm glad they came here. Sally and Franklin back at the van. They have the lights on. They're honking the horn. They're at this point, Sally especially is beyond comfort, as she's obviously concerned, understandably so. She says she's going to go out and look for Jerry, and Franklin says, nope, not without me.
It's the middle of the night. They're in, no man's land.
East Jesus nowhere.
Right. And I guess
Franklin
they've never
hits her with the, well, hang on. I'm going to come too.
They've never watched a horror movie.
No.
Apparently.
They were unaware that they were writing the book on it here.
Yeah. I don't know that Toby Hooper had watched many horror movies either, because he is going through his cast. He only had 5 characters, and he's down to 2. And this all happened in like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Pacing was not his specialty. It's like he stood on a hose and then like got off of it and then turned it off. And he figured out how to facilitate the water flow. They go out searching. Franklin's pushed through the woods with my second or third favorite line of the movie, when Sally's having a hard time pushing him. And he says, get back and push down. And she's trying to operate his wheelchair through this lush forestry. And he finally says, Sally, stop. I think I hear something. Here's something he did, and it would be the last thing he heard. Leatherface reappears and graphically murders Franklin in his wheelchair.
With the chainsaw, finally. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And all 3 kills so far have been by mallet, by hook, and by...
Mallet.
Mallet again. Fuck, Toby Hooper? So we finally get a kill with the chainsaw. And honestly, after the hook, it's just, I was desensitized.
We peaked on the phone.
Yeah, we picked on the hook. It just, I was surprised by how little I cared about the chainsaw kill. Partly it's the way it's shot. I mean, Toby Hooper just showed me that girl impaled, like in detail.
Yeah.
I'm blinking. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes before. And now
I don't even know that long.
Yeah, but now he gets shy when it comes to Franklin's death. It's shot from behind, so his body and his wheelchair are covering the carnage, and it's just Leatherface could be tickling him for all I know.
We just see his arms flailing like the final form that Jeff Goldblum takes in The Fly. He's just, eh.
But from behind, so you don't even get the beautiful eyes.
That's right. But yeah, Leatherface takes care of him real quick, and then the hunt is on as he's after Sally, the last of a literal dying breed of these teens that showed up in Texas. And
literally, don't mess with Texas.
This is a solid 9-minute set piece of him just running around with this chainsaw, chasing Sally through the woods, and then the backyard, and then the home, and then the backyard again.
That's the thing. I don't know if I should commend Toby Hooper or just roll my eyes at how stupid this whole thing is, because it's not even like he repeats the shot. So he actually made the actors go through this over and over, and just her running. That's all that happens. There's no character development. There's nothing. All I can tell is that
I do like Leatherface has this like jig, like feats don't fail me now.
Well, that's the thing, because that was my one thought during this really, really, really long sequence is he's a big guy. He's not particularly graceful. How is it that he hasn't cut himself yet? Because he's running, it's just wilderness.
Yeah. The chase leads back somehow. I don't really know how close in proximity it was or how we got back there, but we're back to the gas station, the barbecue stand that we started at.
It's been several days.
We started at about an hour ago. And Jim Sydow, who's just simply known as the cook in this movie, or the dad, appears. At this point, all we know of him is that he runs the gas station and he makes barbecue. Oh, I'm sorry, his official title is Old Man.
He doesn't even get a job.
It was, yeah, that Toby Hooper and Kim Hinkle writing the script. Fuck it, we'll figure out their names later.
They never call Leatherface Leatherface.
In a moment of real talk, if I remember correctly, I think there was a deleted scene where they referred to him as Leatherface.
They're like, hey, Leatherface, come on, dinner served.
Or like right before Paul Partain died, and Sally, I think I hear something. Would you look at that? It looks like a Leatherface. So they end up at this barbecue shop, which I forget what it's called now. It still stands to this day. And
Franklin's, in honor of the deceased.
the famous Austin barbecue chain. That's where it got its name from. But the barbecue stand, that gas station stands to this day. I think it's just called the station or some shit like that. Anyway, 45 years ago, Jim Sydow comes out. He explains that he's going to help Marilyn Burns. He's going to help Sally. Takes her into the back where the barbecue be a cooking. Says he's going to go get his truck, take her to safety. So he leaves, and then in a moment of tension, he leaves the door open. So we're like, oh, fuck, some shit's going to happen. But instead, they use this to divert your attention to the barbecue pit, where we're supposed to just pick up on the fact that the barbecue is people.
Like
Despite they're not really, yeah.
It's not green and it's not Soylent. How am I supposed to know this?
It's not like there's a human hand and arm in there. It just all looks like sausage and brisket.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So you know this because you've listened to the commentary, or are you just creating headcanon because it makes it creepier that they were actually eating people?
Oh.
Or did John LaRoquette tell us this in the opening?
It was people. No. Because in 2, it picks up kind of. 2 is in canon, and 2 is them. You find out that like their barbecue is people.
It starts with them like the recipe. They're just
pretty much. Jim Sydow's in a chili competition, and like they ask him like, "What's your special trick?" And it's all in the meat.
Marissa Tomei's on the other end of the table.
Yeah, and a young, spry William H. Macy. Hey guys. Man, we have derailed quicker than this scene. Jim Sidow, old man, the cook, dad, whatever you want to call him, shows back up and he is definitely old school. He is not his son. He doesn't have a chainsaw. He just has a burlap sack and a broom.
And Marilyn Burns, Sally, she has a knife. Somehow she loses this fight.
To a man who's 40 years her senior at least and has like no reflex speed.
Yeah, and it is still early in the night for her.
Yes.
I could see her losing the fight after everything that happens in the house, in the next sequence. But she's been running. She's in shape. She fell a couple of times, but she could have beaten him. She could have at least tried to make some damage. But he swats her with the broom like she's a fly.
And then she just gives up the knife. And then she gets hit in the head with the broom and then saddled in a bag, thrown in the truck, takes her back, making sure to poke her along the way. Very devious old man.
Yeah, this is where... so I said the movie took a turn during the hook scene. And this is, I guess, the other turn.
This is where we cross the point of no return.
Well, yeah, because now it's just all the cards are on the table. And... I referenced Saw earlier because that's when I think we went into Saw territory. This was just torture porn before torture porn was a thing. You wanna blame someone for Eli Roth? You can blame Tobe Hooper. This is just the next. I mean, we have 20 minutes left of the movie, maybe. Mm-hmm. The next 20 minutes is just a bunch of dudes making this girl's life miserable, horribly, like psychologically, physically. I guess, thankfully, not sexually. No. I guess there was a line that he wouldn't cross, that Tobe Hooper wouldn't go there. But
it does seem that I keep wanting to call them the Hewitt family because that's what we find out their name is in the remake. But the gentlemen of this movie, old man, hitchhiker, and Leatherface, they all seem pretty asexual. At no point in this does it really establish that they're interested in her in any type of romantic way. It's just they get pleasure out of killing people, chopping them up, and eating them. On the drive back, we reincorporate Edwin Neal back into the story. He's found outside the home. Go in, they tie up Marilyn Burns. Leatherface dons a new mask, a new outfit for the dinner. It's a woman's face that's all made up. And they're going to have dinner, and then they also go retrieve this grandpa character, which they bring down, and it looks like a decomposing body.
That was probably the weakest special effect in the movie. This makeup, if you were to tell me that he's just a mummified corpse, okay, I buy it. But the moment that you actually try to sell this as a person that's still alive, the suspension of disbelief was completely shattered. I just didn't buy it. And at first I thought, okay,
it definitely crosses the movie from horror to fantasy real quick.
Yeah, and you think at first, oh, they're crazy, right? They have the corpse of the grandfather is there, and they treat it like he's still alive. But no, then he starts moving.
Yeah, they slice open Marilyn's finger and stick it into Grandpa's mouth, and he starts feeding on it like a baby on a bottle. And this somehow brings him back to life. John Dugan was his name, which he also was like in his 20s at the time. So I don't know why they had Jim Sidow just right there, old as shit. They could have just used him for the grandpa character, but instead they had to go through all this money and time putting makeup on John Dugan. So
nobody sucked on a finger like John Dugan. He was the best at the audition. So
it was so tantalizing, in fact, that it caused Marilyn Burns to pass out. She wakes back up, and then it is just nonstop screaming and close-ups of her eyeball.
This is even, I don't know if it's actually longer than that chase sequence, but it feels longer than that chase sequence because it's not just her screaming, it's the back and forth of her screams and then all these guys at the table laughing and making fun of her.
Mm-hmm. And Leatherface howling incessantly.
Yes, and the grandpa, I guess, kind of being halfway passed out. At this moment, I realized that I don't know if it's because it happens in the remake or just because it's the year 2019, but I'm like, why isn't there a female serial killer at this table? It's just three dudes. It's total sausage fest. It would feel maybe a little less misogynistic
and
if you
brisket.
had and brisket. It's a brisket fest. Am I wrong? Is there a woman in the remake?
No,
it's just three guys.
There's like a family. There's not a woman killer.
But there's like
There's women.
There's women, because I remember that the trailer, that lady goes, my, oh, my.
Oh, yeah. I remember that too. No, yeah, there's women that help with like facilitating the killing. They don't actually do any of it, though.
Right. Progress.
It only took, what would that have been?
30 years?
Yeah.
Close to 30 years.
30 years, and Marcus Nispel and then Michael Bay to get behind the production of that. So the idea here is Grandpa is going to kill Marilyn as they talk up his game as though he is Fyodor Emelianenko in 2003. He is the end-all, be-all. All it takes is one strike and it's over. So they put a hammer in his hand, and they don't even like duct tape it in place. They just think he's going to hold it, and he just keeps dropping it, obviously, over and over again.
Much like the opening of the movie with Franklin tumbling down that hill, this was just completely inappropriate, out of place comedy. It's just slapstick, and it goes on forever. They just repeat that joke. He drops that hammer like 10 times. Mm-hmm. In the end, I think that it's not that the script called for Marilyn Burns to run away. She just got tired of it.
Yes, and if you believe the legends are shooting this scene too, I think they just want it out. They want it out of here. She escapes, jumps through a window, which that was my favorite part. In the original chase sequence, she jumps through a second-story window. In this escape, she jumps through a first-story window. I guess just doors aren't her thing.
It's her move.
Or she doesn't even throw like a chair through it first and then dive through. She just fuck it and dives right into it.
Those movies, she'd seen action movies. She hasn't seen horror movies, but she was familiar with action movies.
Yes.
That's how you escape.
She watched Vertigo 1,000 times before. She gets out, escapes. It is sunset. Looks to be a gorgeous day in Texas. As she makes her way down the gravel driveway at the residence. Edwin Neal comes out first, begins chasing her.
He's not even trying.
No. He catches up to her.
Several times.
He's got his straight razor. He's just slashing her in the back over and over again. They finally get out to the main road, 2222, 2244, I don't know.
One of the
183. Yeah, I'm not sure which road it is, but they get out there and this big ass truck comes. Marilyn Burns books it. I guess stage right would be from camera's perspective. And we get this is like an Austin Powers sequence. We just get Edwin Neal standing in front of this oncoming truck going, no, when it's clearly still like 40 feet away from him. And then he gets hit and run over and he explodes. It's basically they just put a t-shirt and pants on 4 cardboard boxes and just let it go.
Too little, too late, as far as giving me the feeling of vindication that one of the bad guys is finally done, right? One, didn't feel proportionate to all the misery that he had inflicted. And second, it's not even like Marilyn Burns pushed him in front of the truck. She had zero participation on his death, which already makes it less satisfying. And then it's a shitty special effect. So not even that way connected.
It's a threefer. Truck pulls over and stops because he just killed a man.
Remember the good old days when people would do that?
And our only character of color in the entire movie gets out at this point.
Yeah.
He sees Leatherface and says, fuck this, I'm out.
This guy, he probably dies, right? Because by the end of this final sequence, Marilyn Burns books it with a different truck. Mm-hmm. And this guy is left alone with Leatherface and a chainsaw.
Yeah. So, I mean, presumably. He's not in part 2. So. But what he does do to buy them some time, he grabs a wrench out of his truck and just hurls it, shot puts it at the fucking forehead of Leatherface. Gunnar Hansen goes down like a sack of barbecue, for lack of a better term. Chainsaw falls on his leg, cuts him open, so this definitely slows him down.
This is the same chainsaw that just basically destroyed Franklin within 2 seconds. And yet when it falls on this guy's leg, it kind of, it's like a paper cut.
It's a lukewarm knife through butter. It just kind of takes its time getting there.
Is this a statement of how much of how bland Franklin was, or how tough Leatherface is?
I think it's more of a statement of how much man there was with Franklin that he dulled the blade on the chainsaw. He just went to town on him too much. He gets up. He's hurting. Another truck pulls up. Marilyn hops in the flatbed. Leatherface makes it there, but just as the truck manages to peel away, Marilyn at this point begins laughing maniacally.
She's laughing because she left the black dude behind.
Jesus. She's laughing maniacally. It's easy to deduce from this that she's going to be traumatized for the rest of her days, but she has escaped. We use this getaway to cut to some really artsy conclusion of Leatherface dancing with his chainsaw as the sun rises in the background.
Have you seen the trailer for Joker?
And then the word Finn comes up.
I think it's the trailer for Joker where
he's dancing on the staircase.
He's dancing that's his Leatherface moment.
And then it's over.
I mean,
much like the original Secret Life of Walter Mitty, it ends as quickly as it began.
Paul. Is that how he calls him? I don't remember the name of the boss.
Oh, yeah, when he calls him by his first name.
Roger. Leatherface.
I think they credit him as Leatherface in the credits, despite him never being referred to as that.
It's inaccurate anyway, because he should be Skinface.
I was a bit better. Chainsaw Man. Hitchhiker, old man, chainsaw man.
Girl that survives, girl that gets killed in the hook. It's what, like 80 minutes, 88 minutes, right?
83, if I remember correctly.
The movie could have used a solid extra 10 minutes, maybe.
Excuse me.
To flesh out characters, to make me feel like...
good play on words there.
Made me feel like I learned something. What was the point of all this?
Jim's side out, just with the end of the broom, like you just see like a severed leg and he's trying to shove it in the meat compactor.
Well, I just want somebody to have a meaningful conversation so that we can put this in perspective and, why did this happen? What have we learned from this?
Have some conversation of have Franklin, and I had what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity.
Well, even if he just said we should have heeded the warnings, I don't know. There's nothing to this other than just the visceral horror of just
of backwoods Texas,
right? Which is inaccurate, at least somewhat.
Yeah,
that I wanted civilized Texas to come to the rescue, or at least show up as some sort of contrast. You could. What if the movie ends with he's dancing with the
Antifa.
Well, you pull back from his dance. He's dancing with the chainsaw, and you pull back, and then you see that it's on a TV, and then there's like a family that's not cannibals, just eating a regular barbecue, and they're watching TV, and they're like, "Man, that's crazy." And they're in Austin, Texas, or whatever. I don't know. Give me something other than we just
Beto
torture
O'Rourke watching it. Why did it have to be a white man's face that he wore?
I will come back for your chainsaws. I'll take every single chainsaw you have.
Yeah, and then it just ends, and you're like, what fucking time period was this movie in?
Timeless. Toby Hooper wasn't going for specific details or anything. He wanted to make universal horror. What's scarier than a chainsaw and a big guy?
La La Land. So for 83 minutes, Toby Hooper managed to cram it full of action and devoid it of any substance.
But the thing is, he had about 30 minutes where he could have given us some substance before he gets crazy. He just chose not to. He chose to give us the most inane interactions between the 5 characters. So honestly, if not for how memorable it is, the way that they die, I wouldn't be able to tell them apart, other than the guy in the wheelchair. Like, I couldn't tell you, it was Sally.
Early contender for the Embry, Paul Partain, as Franklin Hardesty, the invalid in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All right.
Ready for real talk?
Fuck yeah. Let's talk about this masterpiece.
Come on, Franklin. It's going to be a fun trip. If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it. Ah!
All right, we are recording for Real Talk for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
A masterpiece.
Is it?
Very much so.
I would like to hear your argument to call this a masterpiece. Is it art? Let's get Scorsese on the phone.
Okay, I would hope Marty would give this
I don't know.
two eyebrows up as opposed to...
His judgment calls have been kind of arbitrary now.
Well, that's your opinion.
Is it because Leatherface doesn't have any superpowers? So now it's actually cinema?
Why are there conflicting release dates on this? This is pissing me off. I always think I have my shit together, and then I keep finding different things. Some places are saying it was released in April. Some places are saying it was released in October. I know they filmed it. Yeah, they filmed it in 73 up into 74. According to Wikipedia, this is October 11th, 1974. The IMDb page said October 4th, 1974. Sometime in 1974, a movie written by Kim Hinkle and Tobe Hooper, directed by Mr. Hooper, was released, titled The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we were born anew as a society.
As a country.
The budget ranges. The most favorite that all involve always like to cling to is the number 80,000. Some people have said as high as about 150,000 for the budget. Regardless, modest. And which led to many not cheap effects, but just non-effects. This, aside from someone, finger painting blood onto Leatherface when he's killing Franklin, a lot of this movie's fairly bloodless. In terms of actual explosion of effect.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's plenty of blood.
The first dude that gets hammered, there's a big pool of blood and whatnot. We'll get into the kills individually and just the amazing nature of it. But yes, 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the most influential horror movies ever, and potentially you could just chop off that horror and just say movies. Unlike the other horror movies we've covered in the Contrarians, most notably recently, our two-parter on Nightmare on Elm Street. It's not like this really had a Kevin Bacon or a Johnny Depp or, a Lawrence Fishburne.
It had Paul
Partain, Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface, Edwin Neal. There's a lot to this. So before we get too deep into it, before I just fucking unleash, and to put
it's all been building up to this.
Put a pin on the fiduciary standings. Box office return was estimated around 30 million, so it definitely made its money. So much so that it spawned an entire franchise and a sequel that came out 14 years later. The Dennis Hopper one, it was a delayed sequel.
So it was the opposite of the Nightmare on Elm Street, where they couldn't crank out the sequel fast enough.
Well, this movie was not met with the same marvel that Nightmare on Elm Street was met with. This was met with, we need to get this fucking off the screen right now.
It was just roadshow screenings. It was Tobe Hooper just traveling America with his print of the Chainsaw Massacre.
He had the can with the fucking 6 reels in it and just, in his splicer and would build it up. In our lifetimes, it was still banned in some countries. Like the first time I rented it, I think it was still banned in maybe Australia. I think the ban on it was hilariously long up until a certain point. Definitely a lightning rod of controversy. And we'll talk about the hilarious irony of that after you finish your quotes there. So what fucking cretins don't like this movie? My dad and who else?
Funny you ask. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times.
He didn't like The Master either. God rest his soul.
There you go. Disqualified.
Yep.
The movie is some kind of weird off-the-wall achievement. I can't imagine why anyone would want to make a movie like this. He goes on to say, and yes, it's well made, well acted, and all too effective. So, he didn't entirely... Right. On the other hand, Steve Crum from Dispatch Tribune newspapers just says, cultish trash set new low standards for brutality. It always bothers me, and I don't know if it always did or just now, in the past couple years or so, referring to a movie as trash or garbage sounds so meaner I don't know, compared to, I think before it didn't bother me, and now it just feels like one of the worst insults to a movie. This is garbage.
I adopted
This
that from
is
my time
trash.
at Cinemark, especially with we worked with a gentleman by the name of Dan, who he and I, that was one of our reviews. We would give bad movies and say it was trash, and I've really held on to that.
Yeah, but I think that there's a difference between like us saying this is
well,
trash and you getting on, a newspaper and saying this movie is trash.
Well, some words also look way more vile in print than they do out loud. Yeah.
Once you get that green splotch next to your picture,
and with the word trash next to it,
yeah, that it stings a little more. And finally, David Keyes from cinemaphile.org says, my personal philosophy remains unmoved by skill and prowess when it comes to an idea this drastic. A chainsaw is a cheater's instrument, a device that disrupts all threads of rhythm and psychology. What is he complaining about?
yeah.
The kills were not artful enough.
I don't know.
Would he be okay
Did
if
you
it
like a
was
double feature with the birds and this? It's like, that's my terrible segue into Tobe Hooper, from all recounts of the making of this, I think he thought he was making some like Hitchcockian type movie that could just be played on like TV.
No way.
John Dugan, I remember specifically in an interview or a documentary, might be the Saws family documentary. I just remember him saying that at one point in time they were in between takes and Hooper was behind the camera putting like masking tape or some sort of tape. He was trying to frame the camera to see what it looked like 4:3 ratio, because he was trying to see, and they asked him, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm trying to see what this is going to look like when they air it on TV. And like no one in the cast had the heart to tell him, like, this is never going to air on television.
That can't be a true story.
That's, from what I've read, he thought he originally submitted it, as the legend goes, he originally submitted it thinking it was going to get a PG rating. Mind you, this is before PG-13. This is before Saturday Night Fever changed the game. But they repeatedly, I mean, understandably so at the time, they repeatedly got an X rating. They kept having to like cut down sequences and shit. I don't have my laptop open, and Julio can attest to this. I can, if you ever want to watch this movie with me, I can provide endless trivia. It's the movie I know the most about the making of, and the production hell and all that shit.
It's like those Amazon Prime pop-ups.
Exactly. And it's not, to be fair, it's not like the trivia, there's anything interesting like Al Pacino almost played the part of Kirk. Like, there's nothing like that. It's just, all the hell they went through making this, because it was just a low budget movie, and it's weird. It's one of those things. It's like the Beatles, like, not to compare, the body of work, but in a sense, nothing existed like this beforehand. So to think up doing something like this is so perplexing.
It's also like the Beatles in the sense that John Lennon had no idea that they were such a sensation and that they were transgressing like so many things. He just thought they were just a family act. He was really surprised when he got on the, what was it? The Tonight Show or whatever. And
the Ed Sullivan Show?
The Ed Sullivan Show, and all those girls were losing their mind. He was like Tobe Hooper. So, this is not PG.
Of course, the famous tagline based off a true story, much like Psycho and Silence of the Lambs, the influence of a man wearing another person's skin, taken, of course, from Ed Gein, who he only killed 2 people. So can you consider that? Does that consider a serial killer?
I don't know. I'll tell you what, though. In this particular case, I don't think it makes a difference. Like, as far as the inspiration. Well, I don't know. Are you legally obligated to just say, hey, this was inspired by this serial killer because there's similarities? Can you get in trouble with the Ed Gein state if you don't acknowledge that? You
can just throw based on a true story on there. Nick Swartzen had an amazing bit about how they can do that in movies, and how he, if he was in Hollywood just to fuck with stoned people in the crowd, he would have put based on a true story before Transformers aired. But no,
I mean, the Coens famously did it with Fargo.
Yeah. And this will actually come up in the remake episode, because they kind of take that based on a true story thing a bit further. So we'll kind of come back to that. So I don't want to go too deep into it. But basically anyone who's listening to this is an intelligent person, so they understand there wasn't an actual Leatherface that killed people with a chainsaw in Texas. It was based off of Ed Gein, who Midwest or somewhere in the fucking boonies somewhere. Crazy man, raised by his mother, lived with her way too long, ended up robbing graves, and he killed 2 people, if I remember correctly.
Is this before or after he ran the motel?
This, the main thing I remember about him was when they raided his home, he had a belt made of nipples that he wore, and a jar of chewed bubble gum that they didn't really know where it came from. The reason that stood out to me is because that is the most off-putting shit I've ever heard in my life.
Nipple belt or chewing gum?
Oh, the gum, way more. Nipple belt, I could see. I mean, Nikki Sixx would wear something like that, so
I guess it depends on the nipples.
Yeah. Who are we talking here? So, this movie fucking rules. This is, it's such a fascinating film in that it is lumped in easily and obviously with the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, even, unfortunately, the Saws of the world, as Saw has penetrated that biodome, so to speak. However, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there can be only one, much like the Highlander. And this movie, still, to this day, 45 years after its release, is accompanied with a sense of danger that none of those movies come close to.
I agree. I want to come at this in two separate flanks, because I think that there's one, obviously, the fact that, yes, it may get grouped with those movies, but it's nothing like them in the sense that this feels real. You know, like, this is not playing around. This is the real thing. And the other movies are just kind of, hey, let's have fun with the scares.
Yeah.
Also, they might even, it blows my mind what you said about Toby Hooper thinking that this shit was ever gonna play on TV as a feature. That, to me, it kind of,
I'm fairly positive to this day it's never aired on television.
It just upends how I saw this movie, and I've only seen it twice, counting tonight, right? Because to me, well, it's not a pleasant experience. It's by design. It's meant to upset you and just gross you out, and even more than that, just disturb you, right?
I guess, I should be saying wow at myself that I've seen it so many times that I can just quote it.
Right. Well, I also understand that it's like a roller coaster, and I guess that's like the other end of it. So on one end, I can see Marty. I can see how it has artistic merit. It's crafted in a way that it elicits an emotional response that's really strong, and it's exactly what that movie is designed to do. And it works. But then, as somebody who's not a horror fan, who doesn't necessarily seek out that specific type of experience, when I watch it, I admire it for being so just aggressively the way it wants to be. But I'm also left, because that's not my thing. When it's over, I'm just like, so why? You know, and I imagine that's something like, if you don't like roller coasters, you look at people that like roller coasters and they go through that 3-minute, 5-minute experience, and then they come out and they're just beaten down by the experience, but they love it. And if you don't like roller coasters, you just can't imagine why. You can't really understand where the pleasure is. Yeah. Why are you? Why would you go again? Right? And so it's that thing where it's not unique to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, give me most horror movies that are revered as a visceral experience rather than a story experience, and I'll find myself similarly confounded. Right? I'm just, if you don't have characters, because you don't, and you don't have a story because you don't really have it, what are you left with? Just this really nasty shit happening on screen and affecting you in a very powerful way, not a pleasant way, right? Unless you're Alex Mattis, apparently. No, and I'm building up to the question of like, what's the experience like to you? Because when I watch it, I'm just recoiling, and this time around, you know, I was taking notes and thinking of funny things to say, so it kind of took the edge a little bit. But if it was just me watching this on a screen in the dark, it would be punishing, and I can put myself through punishing movies when when there's something at the end, I come out with a better understanding of the world or a better understanding of a specific character. But that's not the case here. Here, you're really going in just to get that thrill of, wow, how fucked up is this?
Yeah.
Right? But do you get something else out of it when you watch it?
Based on the clip that you read and also just what I was kind of thumbing through, I think that's a lot of what Ebert's review goes to speak to about it. Like, it's incredibly well made and, you know, it does its part, but like, why?
But you know, you can say that about so many things that are just not on your wavelength, right? I watched The Passion of the Christ, and I could rationalize why we spent, is it a 12-hour movie, 90-minute movie? I don't know. Let's say we spent 90 minutes watching a man getting just tortured. And in this case, it's not supposed to be a horror movie. It's supposed to be, you know, I guess it's supposed to give you some sort of understanding of what
I've still never seen it.
The passion of. Well, my take. I never talked to Mel Gibson
my boy
about
Jim
this.
Caviezel never recovered from it.
No shit. I've never talked to Mel Gibson or Caviezel for that matter about this. But to me, it was like, hey, maybe what Gibson was aiming to do was give you a visceral experience of what it was like to go through all that stuff that usually gets thrown out in just one line when you're reading the Bible or when you're quoting. You're like, oh yeah, and by the way, Jesus suffered.
Yeah.
And now you sit down and you suffer with him for like 90 minutes and you come out of it and you're like, oh, that's fucked up. Maybe next time you bring it up, it has a little more weight because you went through that. But if you are not religiously inclined or you don't have any sort of into that situation, you could watch something like The Passion of the Christ and be like, it's the same as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's well done. It looks great. But why?
So there's a myriad of ways to approach this movie and its redeeming merit. One, yeah, you kind of already mentioned it. I think it's a beautifully made film. I think it looks amazing. And also it's worth mentioning, Julio and I I have the 40th anniversary Blu-ray, which was the 4K restoration, and we can both agree it looks amazing.
It looks great. You could see every misshapen tooth in Leatherface's mouth.
So several things come to mind. One, first and foremost, will always be a nostalgia thing, because the first time I ever saw this movie, it was right after I moved to Texas. And I missed my buddies that I was in 8th grade with and my freshman year of high school with. And I went back to visit over the summer. And my buddy Ben lived right across the street from the video store. It's called the Video Connection. And, you know, at 15, bordering on 16, started smoking weed for the first time. So we got high and then we went and got a bunch of snacks and they were still VHSs. And we're like, oh, and I think the cover was the one, the propaganda one that, or the really salacious one, I should say, that was like banned in X amount of countries and all that. We're like, yeah, let's watch this. So we did and kept smoking and just like had a good time with it. And I just remember there was like 4 or 5 of us on his couch. And I remember at the end when the brother gets out of the truck, we all just, oh shit. Got like, I just have a vivid memory of all of us getting really excited when he threw that wrench at Leatherface's head. But up until that point in my life, I had only seen like the famous poster for it and a couple of still shots of Leatherface. Because, you know, obviously shit wasn't as accessible as it is now. So, and they never showed it on TV. So it was like this unobtainable thing. And I had seen like Halloween and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all that shit up until that point. And Joe Bob Briggs, when he would host the Monster Vision, I think it was called, on TNT. So I'd seen a lot, but it was like this holy grail of them. So seeing it for the first time was a big deal. Then kind of growing up and realizing from a filmmaking standpoint how good it is. Then on top of that, like my friendship with Reed, a friend of the podcast, as much as we both love wrestling, a lot of our friendship's been kind of woven with our love of horror movies, and that's a big part of it. He's someone I know I can talk to for fucking 2 hours about the artistic merit behind this movie. All that aside, nostalgia and personal feelings, just viewing it, I always get off on watching things or listening to music or something and then being like, man, can you imagine like watching this in its time? Because then I kind of appreciate and celebrate that art for being like ahead of its time type thing. So that's a big deal to me too. And then on top of it all, it's just unrelenting. It's, you know, for someone that enjoys horror movies and not for the gore factor, because if that was the case, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the original Halloween wouldn't be my favorite horror movies. It would be fucking I don't know, a Serbian film or Cannibal Holocaust or fucking Saw, which I think we can agree on. This is such a disconnect my dad has with horror movies. He lumps this all in, and I brought him up several times just for context. On my birthday this year, my parents were like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I want to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre." So we all watched it as a family. My dad, not as extreme. You weren't as extreme, Julio, when it was over. He's like, "What redeeming value is there to that movie?"
To be fair, I'm asking that question for the sake of the podcast, not because I'm just why would we do this? I mean,
no, it's definitely. I don't think we've done any movie that crosses the line into like this is repulsive. I don't want to watch this.
At least not horror wise. I'm sure that we've had that
Christmas with the Cranks, but
exactly.
Yeah, with that in mind, it hits so many good beats, and then deconstructing it as a slasher movie, which I don't really think it is, but I know that's where it gets lumped in. Even then, what it's good at is one of the biggest compliments I can give it is the acting comes off pretty solid because it's so minimal. It's so well paced, and like, okay, we don't want to give them too much because then it's going to we want to accentuate the positives, hide the negatives.
It's what Wes Craven didn't do in the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
Exactly. Because 83 minutes. The purveyor of the Mattis rule. And then after all these years, it's still, I've seen it, 24 times. I've seen it in the theater, and then I went to I was telling Julio this, the Draft House back in 2004 hosted a screening at the house in Kingsland, Texas. They put a huge inflatable screen and then they had a 35 millimeter projector in the back of a truck that they just shot it up onto the screen, and they served barbecue. Cast was there. Fucking great time. But all that being said, 45 years later, it still hits you. Like the first kill, Kirk, when he comes through the door and he trips, and then you see that first shot of Leatherface, and then he hits him with the hammer. Like, your nervous laughter when that happened was like a genuine reaction.
I completely forgotten. I mean, like I said, I've only watched this movie once before, and it was over 20 years ago. So the only things I remember were the hook, because that shit will stay with you forever.
Yep.
And the old man sucking on her finger, because it grows me the fuck out. And then the final shot. That's all I remember. So yeah, I chuckled.
That's iconic. And like the color of it all with the red backdrop, and he's got the yellow apron on and the mask, and then it's just him rearing back with the hammer, and then he hits him, and oh god, that's like, oh, brilliant. I'm just getting goosebumps over here thinking about it. It works for what it is, and as someone who it walks right up to the line.
That was gonna be my follow-up question, because I think that there is watching this. I was wondering about that line. I was wondering about where do you draw the line as far as just gratuitous. In Contrarians Corner, I mentioned I called it torture porn, which is something that, I mean, I don't know how recent the term is. They come up with like the Saw movies,
to my knowledge, yeah,
right. And at least on paper, you could see that, because, like I said before, there's no story, there's no character. So really, what's driving you is just seeing these men, massacre 4 kids and then really put the last one through the ringer. And so that's really the only thing that's driving the plot, the only thing that's driving the movie. And so at what point does it become, at what point is that wrong? Is it ever wrong? Where do you draw that line?
That's what's kind of, this movie is not an anomaly, but it's the one of its kind, because the original Halloween, towards the end, it's just, all right, I gotta get the fuck out of here. Where all these other, most other horror movies I like, at some point there's a character or characters that figure out this revenge plot. We're gonna get them back, and we're gonna stop this force. With this, it's just like, as an audience, you're just like, fuck, no one's gonna make it out. And then when Sally makes it out at the end, it's like, oh, who? And then the credits roll, and it's like, what the fuck? To the point, though, this is likely something that I'll touch on too with the remake, where to me they kind of lost sense of the original, because the remake it's really, really violent. And not to say this isn't, but it's violent, and comparatively speaking, maybe like a Pulp Fiction sense, in that you see some blood on camera, but most of the really heavy shit is either implied or done off screen. The Hook, though, to me, the reason that, and you put it well, it stays with you is because it's practical and relatable. This is completely side tangent from what your question was, but rewatching it did make me like, man, fuck all these digital effects and all this shit. People acting at tennis balls and stuff. Like, they figured out a way to make this look real. They put her in this harness, hung her up. Anyway, as you can tell, I get very passionate and emotional about this movie. The line and where it is, it's the same movie. If they showed me an intricate, disgusting detail, all of like the disembowelment and shit like that, that's one thing. That's a big thing with the Saw movies. I follow this horror account that posts scenes from horror movies, and they posted some scene from Saw, and I couldn't even get 30 seconds into it, where it's like, all the torture mechanisms they have in that and whatnot.
I've seen one Saw movie. So, I mean, I do, but I just don't know the specifics.
Yeah, like
there were pigs.
Skin getting ripped off and all that shit. And it's just, I guess the biggest point, the difference with that is, and with the Saw movies too, and a general thing the horror franchise has lost sight of, is explaining why we're here and giving people backstories. And, I don't want to see someone I know has a kid get ripped apart. I'm watching this and I don't know these people. It's just this incidental thing that I'm viewing, and it's never explained to me why. And so it's this brick of time in my life that's 90 minutes where I watched this story. It's like reading a fairy tale. It's like, okay, that just happened. I'm never going to see these people again, and I don't know where they went on and what they do. I don't know where they came from or why they did, and that makes it so much more fascinating than setting the ground with, oh, this person's a mother, and I told you that's why I fucking hate the end of The Strangers, where like she puts the engagement ring on, and then you watch them die. I'm like, fuck you.
Well, I mean, I don't remember The Strangers. I mean, I remember this because you've told me before. If you hadn't brought it up, I wouldn't even remember that. I just
Who's
remember
Scott Speedman?
That's all of Hollywood. So I really can't defend it, but I understand that there's like a story. It just depends on what your priorities are, I guess. And obviously, Tobe Hooper's priority was just, I'm going to scare you shitless, right? I'm going to just bludgeon you with, the backstory is incidental. It's not necessary because the horror works without it.
I'm having a hard time answering your question, but kind of what I was trying to say was like, it affects me. It grosses me out emotionally when I understand like this person that I'm watching getting killed brutally and shit, it has like this traumatic past, and that, and they didn't deserve this and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with here, I don't know what the fuck Franklin did in his previous life. I don't know what he did yesterday. He could have kicked a hobo for all I know. And then the biggest thing is the actual portrayal of violence. And there's a really bad problem of like rape and like overly sexualized violence in modern horror movies that I think is just kind of pointless and fruitless. And even with this movie, and I can tell it's playing a trick on your mind too, because when I say like a bloodless film, you're like, what? For the most part, it is, but it's so intense that you walk away from it thinking it's super violent, but the actual portrayal of like disembowelment and shit like that's not there.
Right. I think my counter argument, or sort of like my branch out of this point, is that, at least to me, when I see that old man sucking on her finger and she's screaming and the other guys are like holding her and all that stuff, to me that's as disturbing, if not more disturbing, than whatever Saw torture I can see, even if it's more graphic.
Really?
So, oh yeah, I mean, because in the end, I think it's just more, not necessarily realistic, but it's a lot easier for my mind to grasp the horror of that versus grasping what it's like to have a metal helmet with spikes attached to your head and that going through. You know what I mean? Like, one thing grosses me out, like the Saw stunts.
It's almost like that's actually scary versus something just being gross for the sake of being gross.
Yes. And, you know, Saw is maybe not like the best example because, like I said, I haven't really watched more than just one movie.
Yeah, and I know we keep making that. Unfortunately, that franchise has defined this generation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this about Saw, and only because
They
you know
make money.
that, but also because we're bringing it up so much that I feel bad, you know, not saying something positive about it or somewhat, you know. It's like I don't hate Saw. I can't hate it because, you know, like I said, I haven't really watched it. I will say that it. I walked away from screening, I think like the third or the fourth one. You know, by the time it was over, I was like, wow, there's more story to this than I thought. And I think that as they go, they've kind of become this really convoluted mythology that I really didn't know the franchise had it in them, you know? And it was like, okay, so you could argue that some people might watch it not for the kills, but really because it turns out that Jigsaw has a master plan that is slowly unveiled through like 7 movies or whatever.
But then he died in one, and then Anyway.
Right, but that's
when they offed my boy Donnie Wahlberg, I was at the game.
Yeah, I can't speak to how much it makes sense, but I'm saying that, you know, if nothing else, I think that you could argue that Saw is not just about the kills, even though that's the most flashy aspect of it. It's also about just the convoluted storytelling that goes with it, which is not something you could say about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Here, it's definitely about the kills. It's because there's not much about it, but that is fine, you know, because that's, again, if Tobe Hooper's intent is that, like, I said roller coaster earlier, but I should have said a horror house. You know, when you go to one of those a haunted house, you know, you go through that, it's like you're literally going to that to be scared.
It's a bullet train, man. It's just, it takes you through it, and it's just right. It ends as quickly as it began, and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
Right. But of course, it's quite a leap to go from like a haunted house to like what happens in this movie. You know, again, you're watching like people suffering, and even if you don't have their backstories and all that stuff, you're still watching like a girl being put on a hook and just like let's say you've seen Cannibal Holocaust. I haven't.
I've
somewhat,
seen, yeah.
Like, but you don't seem like take it by it. So when you don't like it because it crosses this line.
Well, one, they kill actual animals in it, and I'm not cool with that. I'm not a vegetarian or anything like that, but like, yeah, I threw in the towel. There's a part, I'm not gonna give that movie unnecessary publicity. Yeah, and I mean, being separated from it as long as I have, I can appreciate that the dude tried to make like a found footage film when those didn't exist at all, and then paid the actors to stay out of the public for a year to make it seem like they really died in it. I don't know. You're phrasing this, and I keep coming up with all these reasons why I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I can't really put into words where I find the separation.
Yeah, and it's not like I can either.
Yeah.
I was asking because obviously you have a completely different perspective than me, and I hadn't thought about it until we were watching it this time. When I watched it the first time, like I said, I was 20 years younger, and I was just, all right, I get it. I get why people talk about this. I get because it's memorable, because it gets a reaction. And at the time, I didn't feel the need to like go any further than that. It was more, I posted on Twitter earlier. I just went, all right, I can cross this off the list. I don't need to watch it ever again. But today, watching it again, I just had to think about all the other things that I think about when I watch a movie now, which is like, why am I enjoying it? Why am I not enjoying it? Or what am I getting out of this? Why would somebody enjoy it even if I don't? And all that stuff. Craft-wise, it's great.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. These other movies we're mentioning, they're not... That's probably how I justify it in my mind, at least to a certain extent, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's a beautifully made film. These other movies we're talking about, Cannibal Holocaust, I've never seen a Serbian film and don't plan on it, and Saw in those movies. I could almost guarantee you those aren't really, collegially made films in terms of they're not the highest form of their art, and they're certainly not making the most of what they have. They're just kind of elementary. And I think something else to speak for that is a magician's trick type thing. With the Saw franchise, these other movies, they go on to the point of almost self-parody to where, and I know this is hypocritical because I gush about, Friday the 13th all the time, but the magician shows his hand so many times you get used to the tricks, and it's what it is. This movie keeps all the cards close to the vest, and to this day, it's still, I think that's why I fucking love watching it. It's still scary. It's almost 50 years old, and it is still scarier than almost any movie I've seen in my life. I am so thankful that it wasn't on TV when I was a little kid. Like the scene in Terminator 2 where Arnold cuts his arm off and shows Dyson the steel skeleton fucked me up as a little kid. I remember like watching that on TV, and this is one of the earliest memories I actually have. And I remember running and hiding behind the couch in my parents' living room because it scared me so bad. That's all to say, if I had seen this shit when I was like 7 or 8, it would have scarred me pretty badly.
Well, you would have gotten the TV cut, probably the one that has Leatherface looking in the mirror and going, I guess I have some healing to do.
Yeah, he's got the big bandage on his head, and Edwin Neal comes in and unwraps him. Or no, he doesn't unwrap him. I've got this. They're in the bathroom. It's Jim Suddow, Leatherface in the middle, and then Edwin Neal, and they're like shaving and doing their things. And then he takes the bandage off and says, "I guess I still have some healing to do." Yeah, any movie that can genuinely scare me and not gross me out, I think that gets a thumbs up. And what you kind of played into that hand by saying that it still is the scene where they cut her finger and the grandpa starts sucking on it. It's like, this is terrifying.
It's beyond terrifying. It's just disturbing. It's an image that stays with you. And again, kudos to Toby Hooper and everyone involved, because obviously that's what he was going for.
Mm-hmm. And then
horror movie that doesn't disturb you, I guess, is not doing its job. But at the same time, I come out of it and I said, I'm never watching this again. Why would I put myself through this? Little did I know I would have a podcast and we would have this thing called the Autumn of the Remakes.
Well, we wouldn't have to watch this if Toby's son Tom didn't garner so much notoriety years later and win the Academy Award for Best Director. It's a horror movie. It's not, fucker who compared it to Last House on the Left in the beginning. Fuck off. Not a damn thing scary about that movie.
There was a quote I didn't pick that said something about how it was so shocking or whatever that people were missing its political statement. I didn't click on it. I don't know what sort of political statement.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah.
Not sure there was.
That's what. I mean, I don't know.
Well, there was the part where Leatherface had his vote for Ford button on.
Make chainsaws great again.
Yeah, it is a true horror movie in the sense of what a horror movie is supposed to be. It's not just gross out. It's not just jump scares. It's just endlessly fascinating too, and it's so funny because the duration of the franchise just devolved into what all those other slasher franchises are, and it's so weird. It's hard to have a conversation with people that aren't into the horror genre, I should say.
Thank you.
Because my thing is always, all right, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween are over here, and then everything else is over here, because those are actually really well made movies. But the rest of both in the Halloween and Chainsaw case, the sequels are just stupid ass slasher movies that have dumbass one-liners, terrible acting, and in one case Matthew McConaughey. But I feel this is definitely gonna lend itself to some interesting discussion with the remake.
I am very curious because I saw it also once when it came out. I saw it in theaters, and I don't remember much about it, so I can't tell you if my instinct, my experience tells me that because it's a more modern movie, they probably tried to inject some of the stuff that I'm saying this one doesn't have.
Yeah. Right.
And don't correct me yet if I'm wrong. I just want to find out when we watch it. But I'm guessing that when we watch the remake, there will be more as far as this is what this movie's saying about the world beyond we're just gonna shock you and scare you and disturb you. I could be wrong. And if it has something to say about the world, I'm very curious to see what it was. I certainly don't remember.
My main takeaway is Jessica Biel is really hot.
Yeah, but we knew that before.
Arlie Ermey's a good actor.
And after. Also before and after. I mean, you don't need a remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to
reiterate either of those
exactly,
points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can watch Seventh Heaven and Full Metal Jacket.
Or London.
London,
and
because
saving
I don't
Silverman.
know how old she was in Seventh Heaven. Let's strike that off the record.
Yeah, so the double feature now is London and Saving Silverman. Yeah, the remake though, and I'm sure I will point this out when we get to it, heavily violates the Mattis rule. I think it clocked in at about 2 hours. Could have kept it a lot more tight than that.
At least it wasn't in 3D.
I think in closing, I've had a really hard time formulating my thoughts on this podcast because I get so excited about this movie, and like I feel. I think most of what I'm trying to say can be taken away. It's just I get really wordy when I talk about things that I like, but this movie is a tornado, and I love it for that. It's this, it's a tornado that we didn't have. It was before we had meteorologists and forecasting. It's this thing that just showed up, shook a bunch of shit up, went away, and we don't really know why. It's just it's something that came along, and it didn't really do or say much about us as a society, and it didn't do much to change us. But I think for the timing and when it came out and how dark it was for the time, I think the most people disliked it, and the resentment and resistance it was met with just because it showed people how dark people's minds can go and shit like that, and they don't want to acknowledge that.
I guess my final question is, do you feel the lag at the beginning? I didn't really, but again, I was taking notes, and I was kind of like going into almost fresh because I didn't remember any of it. But I did notice how long it was before we got to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not like there's anything of significance that happens. Pretty much all the stuff that they talk about is
just setting tone.
But not even, they're talking about bullshit.
That's the point. That's like, it's setting the tone for what they think their day is going to be.
Yeah, I can see that.
And what I appreciate too is there's no weird ass gaps in time, because as soon as the first guy gets it, dominoes start falling pretty quickly, just like it would happen in a real life situation.
Yeah, the kills are not spaced out.
No.
Throughout the movie.
And it's not like, an hour in, Franklin was like, Sally, where's Kurt?
Oh, yeah. So the kills, I guess, with this we close. The kills, right? So.
No, okay, the kills are what they are. They're all pretty hammer to the head, chainsaw,
hook.
There's nothing fancy, no fuss. Let's talk about the acting here. Marilyn Burns, great scream queen. Cinematically speaking, my favorite part in the movie is the dinner scene where we get those extreme close-ups of her eyes, and just like the panning shots of the whole dinner table. Great stuff. I'm just curious, your thoughts on Franklin. That's really what I was trying to get to. Trying to put a cherry on this proverbial sundae.
He took the long road to get there.
Much like Franklin did.
You mentioned while we're watching it that in some circles he's compared to Tina from Halloween 5. That's unfair. It could be just that Franklin happens to be in a better movie. He never got on my nerves or felt out of place. Obviously he was I don't even want to call him the annoying person in the group, because there's really not much to their personalities, right? It's just, if anything, and I think I mentioned in Contrarians Corner, he's the one that has the most distinctive personality for, if you want to call it that, because he has the wheelchair and he is just the guy that won't shut up and has a chip on his shoulder, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the actor, Paul Pertain, he does all right. I don't know that you could play it better without just seeming out of place.
Yeah.
It's just, he is on the level with everybody else, even though he has more to do. So I think that's a positive.
That makes it work also, I think, as a whole, because as we learned in Nightmare on Elm Street, if you have one Johnny Depp and then a bunch of schlubs, it's...
Oof. I mean, it doesn't work for Paul.
Partain.
Paul Pertain. That's just a joke.
Okay.
It doesn't work for Paul Pertain because obviously he did not go on to star into 21 Jump Street or
no, but it works for the movie because it makes
right.
everyone seem equal.
Yeah. No, he's fine. He's fine. Everybody's fine. Definitely Marilyn Burns stands out, but also she gets,
Yeah.
if you that was like at random, right? They had like 5 pieces of paper and they're like, all right, put them in a hat, pick one. Okay, you're the one that's gonna survive.
Yeah.
And she lucked out. It could have been any of the other 4, and maybe they would have just made the same impression, right? But she definitely did it well.
Yeah.
I totally that last shot of her is just horrifying
Mhm.
when she's laughing and crying and all that stuff. No, she's great. The crazy people, I mean, it's like, what kind of career do you have after that?
Conventions. That's what you do after that.
Set for life.
That is the Jim Caviezel thing of like, well, you've done that, so that's about it. Never going back. Yes. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. We haven't broken ground. This is not cracking in my top 5 movies of all time. I think just because it is with Halloween, I can still take away a certain glimmer of glee. And with this, it's like, despite me being able to laugh at some of the dialogue, specifically Jim Seidow saying, "Look what your brother did to the door," it's still, at the end of the day, it's an intense, scary movie.
So what's the grade?
A plus.
A or A plus? That's at this point, after everything you've said, if it's not an A plus, I need to know why.
Yeah, gotta go full 5. Gotta go full Dave on this one. That's an A plus.
I don't know.
1 star.
It's not gonna be less than 3. It should probably be 4. It should be 4. But if you ask me why not that final star, all I can tell you is that because I don't feel it, but I can't like give you the
Which is
the
valid.
actual elaborate argument. I'm just saying I admire it. I understand why it works so well for you. It just doesn't do it for me, but that's because I just don't look for that in movies.
Mhm.
That's
a huge thing. That's video games, music, anything. If there's no replayability, rewatchability, re-listenability to it, then it can only be so good at that point.
right. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna go like on a website and say it's not cinema.
Yeah. Jesus. Take it easy on Marty.
He was quoted out of context. They'd been at it for like 2 hours. He was ready to go. And then they're like, oh, by the way, what do you think of the Marvel movies?
No, we talked about it off air. Anyone that would expect Martin Scorsese to say something different is the real jackass in that situation. All right. Plugs. I talked a lot on this part, so let's go ahead and wrap this sumbitch up. Our usual plugs: the Festive Years provide our opening and closing tracks. They always kick us off with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99, thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our logo, made by Hans Rothgieser. He has 2 podcasts. He has Nación Combi, which is his podcast in Spanish. You can find that in any podcatcher. It's about Peruvian stuff, mostly politics. He also has a podcast called Living in Peru, which is on iVox, and that's about people that migrate to Peru. And that's in English. You can also just email him at mildemonios@hotmail.com. That's MILDEMONIOS. Or you can contact him on Twitter at mildemonios. Or you can visit his website, mildemonios.pe, PE for Peru. Just talk to him if you want logos, if you want comics, if you want to just talk. I don't know if he's seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sounds like the kind of movie that he would have a strong reaction to, but I don't know if it would be positive or negative. I'm sure he'll let us know after he listens to this episode.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I told you, but he messaged me again once he heard whatever latest episode where we confirmed that we're doing an episode on the original Fly.
Yeah.
And he was like, did I not warn you? But yeah, just hit him up for any of that good stuff.
Only plug of mine, a quick one, as it is the month of October. It's fitting also with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've been getting in a lot of horror movies, watching them. We've been playing them at work. I thought when they said scary movies, they were just going to be playing like Hocus Pocus all month. But then I walked in and they were playing Freddy vs. Jason. I was like, oh, I actually can bring some of my collection. And they had
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No. Even then, they'd be like, just look at me and shake their head. And an homage to the Contrarians. I came into work the other day and they had the 92 Buffy the Vampire Slayer on.
Oh.
Yeah. So with Pike, a fish. Anyway, myself and my horror movie watching, I watched a movie titled The Vampire Lovers, a 1970s British exotic / horror thriller.
Hell's an exotic thriller.
Oh, it's one of those late 60s, early 70s, just like lots...
artsy sex scenes?
No. Just lots of very attractive, buxom women in, horror settings and stuff. And
that kind of exotic.
Ingrid Pitt, who was just an absolute stallion. And then most notably in the movie is Peter Cushing, of course, Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars.
Rogue One.
Oh, that's right. He was all CG'd.
They brought him back
from the dead.
Yes, they did.
Vampire Lovers, 90 minutes. Campy, fun. Towards the end, it gets kind of good. It's an interesting movie.
It throws you off because you just being enjoying the camp of it, and then suddenly...
Yeah. And I love watching old movies where they clearly just built these massive sound stages for it and like set pieces. And yeah, there's shots of that where it's like, it was a simpler time. Just employ a bunch of people to paint the side of a big sheet of plywood, I should say. Sorry, it's 1:00 in the morning. My words are starting to evade me. Anyway, Vampire Lovers, watch it. And I fell asleep the other night watching Bulletproof for the first time with Damon Wayans and Adam Sandler.
I've seen that poster.
Very excited to get back to it because it was horrible. Watch the Vampire Lovers, Bulletproof, take it or leave it.
Fall asleep to it.
There you go.
I was looking through my recent movies. See, you said October, but really I think this episode is our first November episode.
That typically comes after October.
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, it makes sense. In the context, it's gotta make sense. But yeah, it's still October as we're recording this, and yeah, I've been watching horror movies, but really, it being me, it's just like 3 stars.
I was about to say we've established thus far that those aren't the
the way I watch horror movies are not the way that you watch horror movies. So I'm just watching them like in detachment, like judging them the entire time, feeling superior. And every now and then they'll do something that I enjoy, and I'm like, that's good. But
that's like me watching Marvel movies.
Exactly. Yeah. I see common ground.
There you go.
But I do get the occasional surprise, just not this time around. Not when I have something like Chernobyl to plug, which I actually finished watching a couple of weeks ago, but we just haven't had the time. The opening for me to plug it, it's just 5 episodes, and it's great. I didn't know much about the Chernobyl disaster other than just the very, very basics, which is Russia fucked up. And this goes into detail about just the going-ons and basically how it's not that they fucked up, it's that they fucked up and then they did in an attempt to cover it up, they made it worse.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating as an exploration of how like bureaucracy ends up just stabbing itself several times in the chest. It's pretty fascinating. It's really well written, really well acted. And what makes it extra special is just that the showrunner, the creator of the show, writer of all 5 episodes is Craig Mazin, also known as the writer of The Hangover 2 and 3, Identity Thief, movies that they're not generally
are not good.
Well, or even if you like them, he'll be the first one to just completely acknowledge they're not critically well received.
Yeah.
And so, but he has a podcast that's about screenwriting, and when you hear him on the podcast, you're like, this guy knows his shit, right? And then he gets to work with HBO, and he gets to call the shots. He's a showrunner. It's his show. It's not that, I wrote this movie and then it went through the studio grinder and it came out whatever way it came out. So it was pretty cool because I guess you're getting a purer vision of what he usually does, and obviously he cares about the subject matter. So good stuff. He'll be at the Austin Film Festival. He always is. And so if I see him, I'm going to tell him, hey man, I liked you before Chernobyl, before it was cool. But yeah, watch Chernobyl, 5 episodes, an hour each. Really, really good stuff.
And as we've been plugging, and we will plug up until December, the Other Worlds Film Festival taking place in Austin. All information you can need for that we'll have in the links below. Be sure to click on that, visit that.
Otherworldsfilmfest.com, December 5th through 8th.
Boom.
You can, if you go, you can talk to me, you can talk to Alex, or you can talk to Reed, who has opinions about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
And Nightmare on Elm Street. Very different opinions.
He does have differing opinions on Nightmare on Elm Street. He and I are in the same boat with Chainsaw, but here nor there. Go to it. If you're in Austin or the surrounding area, be sure you check it out. It's a good time. It's at the newly renovated Galaxy Theater here in Highland.
Oh, I haven't been there since it got renovated.
Me neither. Looking forward to it. It used to be a shithole, so we'll see.
I don't know. I've been there a few times.
No, it was fine.
I like their wings.
All right, that concludes part 1 of our 2-parter, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Toby Hooper gave us Gunnar Hansen, Paul Partain. Marcus Dispel's got a little ditty in mind called Jessica Biel. So,
do you even, like, off the top of your head, can you remember the name of the guy that plays Leatherface in the remake?
Andrew Bryanarski.
Impressed.
Zangief.
Oh, fuck, we've talked about this.
I know the counterpart to Jessica Biel, her boyfriend, and he was supposed to be in some hot HBO or Showtime show at the time.
One of the guys, I don't know if it's her boyfriend, one of the guys is from 24, and he was also 6 Feet Under. We might be talking about the same guy.
It's possible. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Arlie Ermy, making his Contrarians debut?
Maybe.
We'll know officially at that point, but any and all Arlie Ermy's welcome. That will do it for this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
That summer